It was a cold, drizzling evening in late autumn. The city streets shimmered with rainwater, neon reflections bleeding into puddles. Expensive cars moved swiftly, tires hissing against wet asphalt. Among them, a sleek black Bentley purred softly, its tinted windows hiding the man inside, Alexander Grayson, one of the city's wealthiest men. At 42, Alexander had everything the world considered valuable. His empire of tech companies stretched across continents, his penthouse overlooked the skyline, and his schedule was filled with meetings, galas, and power lunches. He was polished, confident, and outwardly untouchable. Yet inside, he lived with a quiet emptiness, a hollow echo he ignored by burying himself in work. That night, however, fate had other plans. The encounter. As his Bentley approached a quieter street, Alexander's driver slowed down. Ahead, on the side of the road, stood an elderly couple. The man was frail, perhaps in his late 70s, his shoulders stooped beneath a threadbare coat. Beside him, his wife clutched an old umbrella that barely held together, its ribs exposed like broken bones. Rain soaked their clothes, and their shoes were caked with mud. Alexander might have told his driver to keep going, as he often did when confronted by the sight of poverty. But something about the couple made him speak up. "Stop the car." The Bentley rolled to a halt, the engine humming softly in the silence. Alexander lowered his window. "Do you need help?" he asked, his voice steady, almost detached. The old man glanced at him, cautious but hopeful. "Sir, our car broke down. We've been trying to get to the hospital. My wife isn't well." The woman's lips were pale, her breathing shallow. She smiled faintly, as though trying to hide her discomfort. Alexander hesitated. Normally, he avoided getting personally involved. But without fully knowing why, he stepped out into the rain, the chill biting through his tailored suit. "Where's your car?" he asked. The old man pointed to a rusty sedan parked a few meters away. Its hood was open, steam rising from the engine. Alexander walked over and peered inside, though he knew nothing about cars beyond driving them. He was about to call his assistant when something else caught his eye. The trunk of the sedan was slightly ajar. And what he saw inside froze him in place. The trunk. He pushed the lid open wider. Inside, wrapped in a tattered blanket, was a box filled with photographs, old clothes, and letters tied with faded ribbons. On top of the pile lay a pair of tiny, worn-out baby shoes. Next to them was a wooden toy horse, its paint chipped with age. Alexander felt an inexplicable tug in his chest. He picked up one of the photographs. It showed the elderly couple decades younger, standing proudly with a little boy. The boy was holding the same toy horse. The old man noticed Alexander's gaze. Slowly, with trembling hands, he stepped closer. "That was our son," he said softly. His voice cracked, heavy with memories. "He died when he was 12. A sickness we couldn't cure." The woman placed a hand on her husband's arm. Her eyes were full of grief, but also love, the kind of love that had endured decades of pain. Alexander's throat tightened. For reasons he couldn't explain, he thought of his own childhood, of parents who had been too busy building businesses to notice their son's loneliness. They had left him toys, tutors, and trust funds, but rarely their presence. He had grown up surrounded by wealth, but starved of warmth. And here, in the rain, stood two people who had lost everything and yet carried their memories as treasures. An unexpected decision. "Come with me," Alexander said suddenly. The couple looked at him in confusion. "I'll take you to the hospital. My car is warm. You shouldn't be standing here in the rain." Before they could protest, Alexander motioned to his driver, who hurried to help them into the Bentley. The old woman's breathing was shallow, and Alexander could see the fear in her husband's eyes. He gave quiet instructions to head straight to the city's best hospital. Inside the car, silence lingered. Rain drummed gently against the windows. The elderly woman leaned against her husband's shoulder, and Alexander found himself stealing glances at them. There was a tenderness between them, a simple, unspoken bond, that stirred something long buried within him. When they arrived, Alexander personally escorted them inside. Doctors rushed to take the woman for examination. The old man, whose name was Thomas, tried to thank him, but Alexander waved it off. "Take care of her," Alexander said. "I'll cover all expenses." Thomas's eyes widened. "Sir, you don't have to." "I want to," Alexander interrupted. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about profits, deadlines, or publicity. He was thinking about a woman he had just met, fragile and fading, and about the man who loved her enough to stand helplessly in the rain. Nights at the hospital. Over the following days, Alexander found himself returning to the hospital. At first, he told himself it was merely to ensure the bills were handled. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. He began sitting with Thomas in the waiting room, listening to stories about their youth. Thomas spoke of meeting Eleanor, his wife, when they were only teenagers, of building a life together despite hardships, of losing their only child but refusing to let grief destroy them. Alexander listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes falling silent as emotions stirred within him. He was a man who owned skyscrapers and stocks, yet here he was, envious of a poor man's wealth, a wealth of love, loyalty, and shared history. When Eleanor stabilized, Alexander visited her too. She smiled weakly when she saw him. "You remind me of my son," she said once. "He had kind eyes, like yours." Alexander swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Kind eyes. No one had ever described him that way. The change. Weeks passed. Eleanor recovered slowly, and Alexander continued visiting. He began noticing small details, the way Thomas always brought her a flower from the hospital garden, the way Eleanor insisted he eat before she did, the way they held hands even while dozing in their chairs. One evening, Alexander found himself confessing things he had never told anyone. "My parents were rich," he said quietly. "But they were strangers to me. I never knew what it was like to have what you two have." Thomas looked at him gently. "Money builds walls if you let it. Love breaks them." The words pierced Alexander deeper than any business lesson he had ever learned. A promise. When Eleanor was finally discharged, Alexander insisted on driving them home. Their house was a small, aging cottage on the outskirts of the city. Inside, it was modest but warm, the walls lined with photos, the shelves filled with handmade trinkets. It was a home, not a mansion, yet Alexander felt more peace there than in his penthouse. Before leaving, he made a quiet promise to himself: he would not return to his old life unchanged. What he did next. In the months that followed, Alexander began restructuring his life. He reduced his workload, delegating responsibilities to trusted executives. He created a foundation in memory of Thomas and Eleanor's son, dedicated to providing medical care for children in need. But more importantly, he began seeking connection, with his estranged relatives, with old friends, even with strangers. He volunteered anonymously at shelters. He invited Thomas and Eleanor to dinners, where laughter replaced the silence that had once haunted his table. The emptiness inside him began to fill, not with money, not with accolades, but with the quiet joy of giving and receiving love. The final revelation. One rainy evening, nearly a year later, Alexander once again drove past the street where he had first seen the elderly couple. He asked his driver to stop. He stepped out, letting the rain wash over him, and looked around. It felt like a circle completed. He realized then that the night he had opened that trunk, with its baby shoes, its toy horse, its box of memories, he had not just discovered the story of a lost child. He had discovered the missing piece of himself. And it had changed him forever.